members that can't make it today, so we're going to go ahead and record.
Okay. Hi. Thanks for
Hi.
having me.
Thanks
Welcome.
for being here. And I was going to say, Lindsay, you know Bailey. Bailey's here.
Yes. Hello.
Hey, good to see you.
I'm going to go ahead and, well, I was going to say, I think Meryl will be back, but I'll just grab a picture of her. We're going to grab a screen cap really fast if everybody's ready, and then we can start chatting. All right, guys.
You
One,
like funny
two,
faces or
1, 2, 3. Perfect. Okay. So we had started our discussion, and I think we have a lot of really good questions for you, and we're excited.
okay. I'd love to hear a little bit just about how y'all came together.
I started the book club 2 years ago. We were in person initially, and then we've grown and we have a lot of members all over the United States. Jesse's up in Seattle. Everybody here right now is either in Atlanta, Woodstock, kind of close right now, but we have some people from Michigan. I have a friend that travels around. She was in Mexico at one point. Actually Bailey's friend too, our friend Jessica. So she's in Myrtle Beach. So we've gone virtual due to the pandemic and then stayed virtual because of the members that we've acquired. So I plan the book list kind of at the start of the year or towards the end of the year prior, and then arrange for authors to join us. Bailey was wonderful to have this connection with you, which I was super excited about. So she helped make that introduction, and we're grateful to have you.
Great. Yeah, I grew up in Georgia and in Woodstock. Bailey, I always think of you when I watch Hocus Pocus.
Really? Oh my God. I love it.
I thought you did. Yeah, fire away. I'd love to answer questions. Happy to talk about anything.
Does anybody want to start?
I'll start. I really liked the relationship with Cami and Lex. Kind of how Cami was her mentor. Did you have anyone who inspired that character of Cami?
I didn't have anyone specifically from the relationship standpoint. But in terms of kind of her personality a little bit, it was actually inspired by someone who's now my boss.
Oh, okay.
At the time when I was writing it, she wasn't my boss, but she grew up in Puerto Rico and has kind of like a really like loud and like celebratory personality. So I talked to her a lot about, she gave me some really great backstory about like growing up in Puerto Rico, and I knew that I wanted to have the character of Cami be like what sparks that language, that love of language for Lex, because I wanted, Lex and her mom to have some love of language in common, but for Lex to have like come around to it on her own sort of. And I thought it would be really powerful to like bond Cami and Lex that way. But yeah, some of the characters are based on real people, but Cami's relationship is not. The one that's kind of most based on a real person is my friend Grant, who was one of my best friends in high school, and we're still close friends. And kind of Lex and Grant's relationship is based off our relationship in high school.
Okay.
That was really enjoyable, the relationship between the two of them. When we meet him and we go back in time and into the present, it felt real.
Great. Did I successfully trick y'all into thinking they were going to be romantically entangled?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. Too many Hallmark movies that you watch a Hallmark movie and you go, oh, the friends are going to eventually see that they're right for each other.
I see that. I mean, I read that all the time. So I was like, I want to write a book where it's not going to be that way, but just because that's the trope, I feel like you have to kind of like, I was like, wanted to like play with that trope a little bit, to make the reader think that's how it was going to go. But yeah, I don't know. I love romances that are like that, but I didn't want to write that for this book. It could have ended like that though, for sure.
Yeah.
Did you know how you were going to end this story when you started writing it, or did it change as you were writing? Like, what was your process?
Sure. So typically I know like the beginning of the book and then the end of the book. So when I start writing, and then the middle is somewhat of a mystery. So at the beginning of the book, I knew that Grant and Lex were going to be half siblings and that they were going to have this relationship. And I also knew kind of like how the letters were going to end up with Margaret. And then everything else for the ending was kind of, I had like a clear picture of those, yeah, but like the financial stuff with her dad, kind of fleshing out the relationship with her father came later. And then I went back and forth on kind of what Cammie's ending should be.
I read in your acknowledgments that your husband's mom is a doctor. Is that kind of where you got the Lynch syndrome for Cammie at the end?
Yeah, so I always have her like, I'm like, I need help killing someone. My Google searches are probably insane. I was also Googling a lot about like carbon monoxide poisoning since that's how Margaret died, and she helped me with that. And then I also chatted with her and also like a gynecologist that is friends with my husband too about like the beginning of the book and like how Lex would have recovered from that experience and kind of like what her symptoms would be. So yeah, I try to check everything out as well as I can. I also had a linguistics master's student fact check all the linguistics stuff in the book just to make sure that was accurate. I don't have a background in linguistics, so I did want to it bugs me so much as like a journalist when I read a book about journalism and there's like clear things that are not real in it. So it's like, I don't want to create that if there's any like linguistics people reading this book.
They would probably be very quick to judge you. I'm just guessing. I'm not a linguistics person. I'm just thinking that would be a group who would just pounce.
Yeah, I actually did. I found someone emailed me. So after my first book, I like kept waiting for someone to email me like a mean email saying I got something wrong because I hear that from authors all the time. Like they say like people just love to like point out things that are wrong, like you're gonna get emails, it's okay. And I had never had one. And then I very recently got one about this book because I say I'm like in the church bulletin, which at the very beginning of the book, there's like that church bulletin that enters it, which I added later. And I mentioned christening, even though I said it's a Baptist church. So it should be a dedication. And then the email was very mean. But
oh my gosh.
They were triggered by that. Seriously, they were triggered by dedication versus.
I honestly think this woman was like scarred, but she was like saying that she grew up in like a small town, that she was Baptist, and like that was ridiculous. And like basically I made a mockery of all Southerners.
Her life is ruined now.
I know. I actually sent her like a really nice email back and I was like, thanks for pointing out the error. Like, I'm going to change it. Like, thank you. I've done research on it. Like, please don't take away my Southern card though. I worked hard for that. And she sent me like an email in return and she was like, I realized my email was really mean. And I was like, good.
Well, you handled that really well. Yeah.
Try not to add to the craziness on the internet.
Yeah, I imagine authors are targets. We've heard from a few others that they get some just off the wall stuff, So.
Yeah. I get a lot of people emailing me like their family stories sometimes, which I always like actually.
Oh, yeah, that's sweet.
Do you ever try to incorporate any of those into your stories?
I'm not above it. I guess I haven't I take stuff all the time from places. Like, for example, in this book, one thing that kind of sparked off Margaret's journey was that I read, do y'all ever go on Reddit and read the, like basically like where people like say all about their lives? I don't know which sub it is, I can't remember. But someone was like talking about how their mother was like got all her stuff stolen in Europe and like how it was like the best thing that ever happened to her because she was backpacking in Europe and then she like met these like army guys and like had a great old time. So I was inspired from that for Margaret's story. I was like, I think that it would be great if she also got all her stuff stolen, and it ended up being like the best thing that ever happened to her, because that's such like an interesting concept.
Yeah.
So yeah, I still like bits of dialogue from like Taxi Drivers. I'm not above it. I actually write down, I have like index cards like in all areas of my house, all my bags, and anytime I like hear something that I want to like maybe include in a book, I write it down on an index card, and I have like file folders of them. So I just like go through them periodically, and I'm like, I'm gonna put this in my book.
I loved Margaret and John's story. Like I could have read about that all day. I find it really interesting, kind of diving psychologically into what makes people the way they are, like how Margaret became the mom she was. I found that part really interesting. I liked her story a lot.
Great.
Yeah, that was my favorite, was Margaret's story when she was young, that part of it. Very intriguing.
I loved writing that part. Did the rest of y'all have favorite characters?
I was going to ask you who your favorite character to develop was and who was the most challenging.
Margaret was probably actually my favorite character to develop, just because I thought like I had a lot of fun writing her sections, just like how kind of like pithy she is in the sections. And I also buried like a lot of somewhat obscure literary nods in like her different diary entries. So she was a lot of fun. And then I think I always have a harder time developing out male characters. And I think that Dennis was harder for me to develop out. And it took longer for me to develop out.
I have to say, I was surprised, I guess. I wasn't surprised that she left John and wanted to come back home, but I was a little surprised that she ended up with Dennis, just because their beginning, she just pretty much just didn't seem like they fit. And she wanted one thing and he obviously wasn't interested, or at least when they were young and younger. So yeah, that part kind of surprised me.
But it's what her mother wanted. And I think, one thing you learn, especially women my age, I don't think it's as prevalent now, but I think it was, mothers and fathers had a lot more influence on who you married. I mean, I have a lot of friends my age who had early on marriages that didn't last, who then later married someone more compatible. And it was a lot of influence of their parents. Their parents were like, this is a good match for you. You will have a good life. You will be well taken care of. And I don't think that's quite as prevalent as it was at one time. And it's kind of prevalent I'm from the Midwest, but my Southern friends have spoken about it quite frankly, that more than one of them was told, the best man is the wealthiest man, which was not at all the way I was brought up, but they had mothers particularly who pushed that philosophy on their daughters.
I think too, when you hit rock bottom, if someone is like your parent or maybe a friend, like a church leader, anyone really is like giving you a clear rope and is like, if you just follow these steps, everything's going to be okay. It's really easy to take the rope, even if you know that it's not going to be like the best for you in the end. So I feel like that's kind of what Margaret does, and also a little bit about what Lex does in the very beginning when Cammie kind of throws her that rope of the plane ticket, where it's just kind of like she's down in the cell, she doesn't know where to go, and like a rope gets thrown down, she's like, might as well climb up this rope.
Yeah, that's a good point.
What are y'all reading next?
The Return by Rachel Harrison. And she's actually joining us next week, which I'm super excited about. I think our next like 5 or 6 events are author events. So they were all grouped together at like one time in the year, but it worked. So
don't read a book every single week.
No.
No.
We
It's like
fit
2 a month.
Yeah.
we fit this one in because of the connection when Bailey had found it and we realized and we were super excited. I squeezed this one in so it puts books like week after week, which makes it really hard. But I'm sorry.
Thanks
But
for
I'm like there.
and more. I feel like it's perfect reading season though. Like when you get your
Yeah.
tea, it's like a little cooler.
Yes, turn on the fire and snuggle up and read. I love it.
Are you working on any books currently?
I am. So I'm going in a few different directions. I'm kind of trying to, I think I've been struggling during the pandemic to stay motivated to write. I'm sure that a lot of people have struggled with motivation during the pandemic, but it's almost like, what do you write? Yes, there's like, so for this book, it actually occurred in 2020. So I ended up having to like revert the timeline to make it occur like before the pandemic happened. There was like a whole like conversation among writers, like, do you just like let things happen, pretend there's no pandemic? Do you include the pandemic? Do you like move it before? So I just moved it before, but I guess that's not super relevant to my next book, but I think one thing I'm interested in is siblings and like big families. So I'm playing around with an idea of an older woman who comes into some money through like a late in life husband, and then he dies. And she's kind of estranged from all her children, and they basically come like creeping back in due to the money. And she then has like stipulations for each of them, like what they have to do to like get their share of the money. Like think kind of a la The Nest, if y'all have read that, or
Yeah.
loved both of those.
Okay.
Anything else?
I think that's
Yeah, I was
interesting
gonna
what
say.
you brought up about if you're writing books or television or movies or whatever, how do you, because a lot of times right now we kind of want to escape from that. You know, we're still dealing with getting the vaccines, the boosters, the masks, the wear your mask, not wear, all that kind of thing. And so you kind of want to escape from that for a while and not deal with it. But at the same time, if you're writing currently and you want your work to be current, it seems odd that you'd ignore it. So that's a kind of how do you balance that, hey, I'm not just pretending that it didn't happen, but at the same time, I don't want to drag everybody down and have all my actors or my characters with their faces covered up. I mean, it's tough.
Yeah, and I think at least for me, I don't really feel like I have the distance yet to like fully process the experience of the pandemic. And as a writer, and I think that like with 9/11, it's pretty similar. Like you didn't see people start including 9/11 in their books until like 5 or 6 years after 9/11. And then there was like a slew of books that included it. I think that's probably what we'll see with the pandemic. But I do have one book on my shelf that has like it's like a romance and it's set during the pandemic, and part of it is like one of them's like quarantining next to the other one or something. So I'm interested to read that. I think it's the latest by Mary Alice Monroe.
Okay.
Why did you pick Memphis? It's basically your backdrop.
Yeah, so my family has a deep history in Memphis. My mother was born there. My grandfather was born there. And one of the kind of driving forces for me was that I really wanted to kind of like get closer to my grandparents through this. So I really wanted to like hear all the family stories about Memphis, kind of like while I still could. And my grandfather actually passed away last week, unfortunately, but he loved Memphis, and I'm so glad I wrote the book when I did and that I put it in Memphis. His name is Dennis, so the character of Dennis is named after him. But yeah, so and then the more I started hearing the stories about Memphis and also researching Memphis, kind of the more I came to love it. It's kind of like not one of the southern cities that you think of immediately. I also, since my first book was set kind of around the Atlanta area where some of y'all live, I didn't want to set my second book there because I didn't want to be seen as kind of like a Georgia author only.
Yeah.
And it was also interesting from like, since the book is set in a few different time periods, like we get to see Lax in Memphis in like 2019. We get to have her memories from when she was a kid. And then we have Margaret's memories of Memphis. So the city has changed so much and so quickly, and it's gone through several waves. So I thought that it would be kind of a great city because of that, to spotlight the different changes in time.
Did you find the timeline challenging to write and jump around, or was it something that you enjoyed when we, go from Margaret's story to Lex's story, like present day to past with the journal?
I found it fun. I didn't really have a timeline jump in my first book, so I knew I wanted to like play around with it in my second book. I did end up writing Margaret's story like all at once and then like slicing it up and putting it in the book. And like in with Lex's story. So that was helpful to me, just to like write them first separate and then kind of like put them together. Yeah, it was good fun. It was a good distraction during the beginning of the pandemic too, to do all the research of like Memphis in the 1980s.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was a good character. Sometimes the locations are good characters, and it was enjoyable. It made me want to go to Memphis again because it's been a long time.
Yeah, I love it when people tell me that. Definitely go, because I actually went in February 2020. So good timing.
Yeah,
I had such a good time. It was awesome. I went with my mom. Highly recommend it.
Did you find it hard to tackle suicide and the miscarriage, or because those are both really heavy topics?
Yeah, I mean, I think through my writing is kind of how I process like my own trauma, but also like larger family trauma. For the miscarriage part, one thing that kind of made me want to write about it is that my mom had a late term miscarriage at 6 months. And she kind of had recently started talking about it more. Like before it was very like hush hush, and talking to me about it more. And I had her write me an essay about her experience, and it was really disturbing, but I think like it helps both of us kind of like work through the generational issues with that. And I think it gave her a lot of peace too, to like see it in the book. And I've had people reach out to me who have had that experience too, and kind of say that it gave them comfort. And then I think with my first book, it was based on an opioid overdose that may have been a suicide that was also in my family. And I've had a lot of people reach out about that as well, just saying that that gave them comfort. So I think it is difficult to write about painful things, but the great thing about fiction is that it lets you explore like painful experiences in a safer way, like more safely than in a nonfiction book, or more safely like in a journal or something like that. And that's something that I love about fiction.
Thank you for opening up about all of that. That's all.
I'm an open book, baby.
Well, we saw that you're a UGA grad, so
yeah.
Are you into SEC football and all that, like most UGA grads?
I do watch the games. I was watching yesterday, but I wouldn't say I'm like a big fan. I'm more kind of like my husband watches them and I'll sit on the couch and like journal at the same time.
Yeah.
Something like that.
That's how I watch.
Yeah. So it's like by osmosis, maybe.
Yeah.
I wish them the best. I hope they do well.
Yeah.
Anything else? Okay, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
It was wonderful to meet you.
And I hope that y'all have a great session next week, and I'll watch Hocus Pocus in celebration of Bailey's birthday.
Yeah, perfect
Oh,
time of
thank
year.
All right, bye.
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 You. Let's see.